What if the FIA just banned your race strategy in the middle of a Grand Prix weekend? With no warning, Pirelli and the FIA have just enforced a strict 25-lap limit per tire in Qatar, blowing up every team's game plan overnight. Red Bull is furious. Verstappen's entire setup is compromised. And now the fastest driver on earth may be forced to race with both hands tied behind his back. Was this really about safety, or is Formula One rewriting the rules on the fly? We're breaking it down right now, so hit subscribe if you love real F1 analysis without the hype. The drama began on a Friday, but not on track. It started in the data. After initial free practice runs at the Qatar Grand Prix, Pirelli noticed severe tire degradation patterns forming on the left front and rear. Micro tears. Internal blistering. Patterns that, under race loads, could lead to sudden failures. This wasn't just graining or wear. This was structural damage forming in under 30 laps. And just like that, alarm bells went off in Milan and Geneva. A decision had to be made fast. Within hours, the FIA stepped in. A new rule was imposed: no tire soft, medium or hard could be used for more than 25 laps total. Not in a stint. In the entire Grand Prix. That meant all race strategies were invalidated overnight. Teams would be forced into at least 3 pit stops, whether the tires looked fine or not. The message was clear: safety comes before performance. But in Formula One, that kind of shift isn't neutral. It changes everything. For teams like Red Bull, it was devastating. Their setup philosophy depends on long-run tire management. Verstappen's edge over the field, especially in races, comes from stretching stints longer, keeping clean air, and dictating pace without burning rubber. With the new tire cap, that strategy was dead. Verstappen would now have to attack harder in shorter stints, risk traffic, and fight through midfield chaos after every stop. The usual calm, clinical domination was gone. This race would become a brawl. And for Max Verstappen, it was more than just a tactical shakeup, it was a direct challenge to his rhythm. Few drivers are as methodical as Verstappen when managing race pace. He doesn't just drive fast, he drives deliberately. He reads the tire life lap by lap, stretching them just far enough to build gaps while others pit early. That approach is what's made him nearly unbeatable in the last 2 seasons. But now, in Qatar, it was all useless. He'd be thrown into short bursts of sprint-like pace, constantly resetting, constantly in danger. The rest of the grid reacted fast. Ferrari and Mercedes immediately recalculated race models to front-load performance and sacrifice longevity. McLaren focused on maximizing outlaps and box entries. Alpine, knowing they couldn't win on outright pace, leaned into safety car windows and flexible pit timing. Red Bull, meanwhile, had to improvise. Verstappen could no longer race like a predator. He had to survive like a street fighter. Every stop, every tire swap, every re-entry into traffic became a chance for disaster. And that's where the tension really lives. This was not just a technical regulation, it was a psychological reset. A weekend where the world champion came in as favorite, and left having to fight in conditions that cancel out his strongest weapon, control. And when you take control away from Max Verstappen, the race doesn't just get closer, it gets dangerous. Because when he's under pressure, we see a different version of Max. And Qatar? That might be where that version is unleashed. Red Bull's entire race DNA in the Verstappen era has been built around tire longevity and stint control. The RB20 doesn't always qualify on pole, but it rarely loses a race once the lights go out. Why? Because the car is engineered to come alive after lap 15. While others overheat, slide, or chew through rubber, the Red Bull settles in and Verstappen executes long runs with ruthless efficiency. That's why the 25-lap tire rule wasn't just inconvenient. It directly deleted the car's strongest strategic asset. Under normal conditions, Red Bull builds their weekend around a 2-stop plan. Verstappen stretches the first stint longer than anyone else, builds a gap as others box early, and controls the race from clean air. His pace becomes metronomic, smooth inputs, zero lockups, no wasted tire energy. But in Qatar, that was no longer possible. With a hard limit on tire life, the team couldn't stretch stints. They were forced into 3 or more stops, turning the race into a series of sprints, a scenario that compresses the field and raises the risk. This shift had ripple effects across every lap. Verstappen's margin of safety, his usual 5 to 10 second buffer, became worthless once he had to pit early and rejoin behind traffic. Even with DRS, passing backmarkers and midfielders costs time and tires. Worse, the undercut became more dangerous than ever. If McLaren or Ferrari boxed just a lap earlier and rejoined clean, Verstappen could lose track position through no fault of his own. And in Qatar, where offline grip is minimal, losing position often means losing an entire stint. Fuel burn also became a hidden complication. Red Bull normally manages fuel in longer stints, allowing Verstappen to save early and push late. But in this sprint-style format, there was no room to lift and coast. Every lap had to be pushed to the edge. That altered engine mapping, brake bias, and thermal load, introducing variables the team hadn't optimized for under park-firm conditions. They weren't racing the car they had simulated. They were now improvising a solution in real time, and even Red Bull has limits when flying blind. The driver dynamic changed too. Max Verstappen is not a driver who panics, but he is a driver who calculates. He builds races like a chess master, long-term, patient, brutal. But in Qatar, that strategy was off the board. Every stint was a sprint. Every push lap risked tire degradation. And every pit stop was a gamble. This is not where Verstappen shines. He still leads with raw pace, no doubt, but this rule removed the control he thrives on. It turned the race into a reaction game, not a domination one. And that's where Red Bull's vulnerability finally showed. For the first time all season, they weren't just being challenged on pace, they were being attacked through structure. The 25-lap rule didn't come from rivals or track design. It came from the governing body and the tire supplier. And even if it was for safety, the outcome was the same: Red Bull lost their advantage before the race even began. And for Verstappen, who had already secured the title, this wasn't just another GP, it became a test of adaptability, on someone else's terms. The 25-lap tire limit in Qatar wasn't born out of politics, it was triggered by data. During the first practice sessions, Pirelli began examining tires returned from long-run simulations. What they discovered were microscopic fractures forming inside the carcass, specifically on the left-hand side due to the high-speed energy load through turns 12 to 14. These weren't normal wear indicators. They were signs of structural fatigue, the kind that can cause sudden blowouts without visual warning. That was the tipping point. In response, the FIA and Pirelli acted quickly. After emergency meetings with team principals and race engineers on Friday night, a new regulation was introduced: no set of tires could exceed 20 laps in the sprint, and no tire could be run for more than 25 laps in the Grand Prix. There was no exception. Even if the tire looked pristine, even if degradation was low, the rule applied. Teams would need to log tire stint data in real time, and if a set exceeded its limit, the car would be black flagged for safety violation. No appeal. No compromise. This decision turned setup strategies upside down. Teams had already locked in suspension geometry, ride heights, camber angles, and brake cooling profiles based on normal tire expectations. But now, they needed to preserve performance across more pit windows and faster warm-up phases. That forced teams to run lower fuel loads per stint, adjust downforce balances for repeated acceleration zones, and remap engine modes to prioritize immediate pace over consistency. Essentially, every car had to behave like a sprint racer even if it wasn't built to be one. Enforcing the rule required coordination. Each team's telemetry had to be synchronized with FIA monitoring systems. Stint counters were activated automatically, not manually, based on the moment each set of tires was mounted. That meant no hiding, no bluffing, no gray area. As soon as a car crossed lap 25 on a single compound, a warning would appear. And if the tire wasn't changed by the following lap, the stewards were instructed to flag it immediately. It was one of the strictest mid-weekend enforcement measures seen in recent years. From a driver's point of view, the rule destroyed rhythm. In typical races, you can feel the tire degrade, adjust your pace, manage temps, and extend stints. But in Qatar, none of that mattered. Even if you had tire life left, you were forced to pit. And that felt artificial. Drivers like Verstappen, Norris, and Hamilton had to change their approach. No more subtle build-up. No more racecraft over time. It was all about quick bursts, knowing full well the tires would be removed long before their true limit was reached. That mental shift was as disruptive as the mechanical one. Pirelli defended the decision without apology. This was not optional, their spokesperson said. The risk of failure was real. And with Qatar's layout and aggressive curbs, we could not allow the unknown. Even drivers who disagreed with the rule accepted the reasoning. The FIA, on its part, emphasized that safety has always been a non-negotiable priority even if it comes at the cost of spectacle. But that didn't soften the blow for teams like Red Bull, who had built their entire weekend around a strategic platform that no longer existed. Red Bull has spent years crafting an image of technical invincibility. Ever since the 2022 regulation reset, they've built cars that are not just fast, they're untouchable over race distance. But in Qatar, with the tire stint limit imposed by Pirelli and the FIA, that aura cracked. For the first time in recent memory, Red Bull didn't control the strategy board. They didn't dictate the pace. They had to follow rules that neutralized their core strength. And in doing so, Formula may first have unintentionally revealed that when Red Bull can't manage a race their way, they bleed like anyone else. The most visible weakness was Verstappen's vulnerability in traffic. Normally, he builds clean gaps by staying out longer than rivals, then rejoining in open air where he can push freely. But in Qatar, with stints artificially shortened, he had to pit earlier and return to a field he wasn't used to fighting in. Suddenly, Verstappen was scrapping for position against slower cars, burning tires in DRS trains, and losing time that would never come back. The precision that defines his racecraft was compromised, not by mistakes, but by environment. His radio traffic told the story. For a driver usually in full control, Verstappen sounded frustrated. He questioned the pit windows, the grip on outlaps, and the tire feel in cooler phases. None of it was chaotic, this wasn't a meltdown. But it was revealing. When Max loses the freedom to race on his own terms, his superiority narrows. He's still the fastest driver on the grid, but under rigid restrictions, the field compresses. And that compression exposed just how tightly Red Bull's dominance is tethered to flexible tire life. Even Christian Horner, usually composed in post-race interviews, hinted at the discomfort. He defended the rule publicly but added, "It's hard to optimize when your tools are limited." That was no casual remark. Red Bull builds tools tire-friendly aero profiles, low-drag suspension geometry, fuel-saving engine modes. In Qatar, those tools were taken off the table. And when forced into a system where adaptation mattered more than optimization, they didn't collapse but they looked mortal.